Hello friends. I can see 90% of my viewers don't subscribe while watching videos. Please hit the subscribe button and like this video. Press that bell icon for notifications. And tell me in the comments from which city you are watching this video. My name is Juliette Marlowe, and this is the story of how the worst day of my professional life became the catalyst for the greatest victory I have ever achieved. The fluorescent lights in the conference room buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I rushed through the door, my heart pounding against my ribs. The smell of fresh coffee and expensive cologne filled the air, but all I could think about was the tiny onesie still tucked inside my purse. The soft cotton fabric that had been pressed against my 3-month-old daughter's fevered skin just hours earlier at the pediatrician's office. I was late. 37 minutes late for the most important pitch of the quarter. Every eye in that room turned toward me as I slipped into my seat, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled out my presentation materials. The partners sat around the mahogany table like judges at a tribunal, their faces carved from stone. At the head of the table sat Richard Blackwood, my boss, his silver hair perfectly styled, his tie worth more than most people's monthly rent. He looked at me the way someone might look at a piece of gum stuck to their shoe. "Juliette Marlowe," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Each word fell from his lips with calculated precision. "This job is not for moms. You are distracted. You should think about stepping back." The air in the room became thick, suffocating. The ticking of the antique clock on the wall seemed to grow louder, each second stretching into an eternity. I felt the blood drain from my face, then rush back in a wave of burning heat that started at my chest and spread upward until my cheeks felt like they were on fire. But it was not shame that was burning through my veins. It was rage. Pure, undiluted fury. I sat there, staring at this man who had the audacity to question my worth, my capabilities, my future, all because I had brought life into this world. This man who had benefited from my work for 7 years. 7 years of 18-hour days, of weekends sacrificed to close deals, of holidays spent crafting proposals that saved this company millions. I was the one who had landed Morrison Industries when they were ready to walk away from a $15 million contract. I was the one who had pitched the Henderson account in a snowstorm, driving 3 hours through a blizzard to secure a deal that had kept half the company employed during the economic downturn. I was the one who had trained Marcus Rodriguez when he was fresh out of college and did not know a profit margin from a pizza margarita. I was the one who had mentored Isabella Chun through her first major presentation, holding her hand through every slide until she found her confidence. The people sitting around this very table owed their careers, in part, to my guidance, my expertise, my relentless dedication to excellence. And now, because I had a baby, because I had dared to become a mother while maintaining my professional ambitions, I was suddenly unfit, distracted, a liability. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, to unleash the storm of words that was building inside me like a hurricane. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was the smug expression on Richard's face, or the way the other executives avoided my gaze, looking down at their phones or shuffling papers as if they were suddenly fascinated by quarterly reports they had seen a dozen times before. In that moment, I realized something that would change the trajectory of my entire life. I realized that no amount of arguing, no brilliant defense, no impassioned speech about my qualifications would matter. The decision had already been made. They had already written me off, reduced me from an accomplished professional to nothing more than a distracted mom. I stood up slowly, gathering my presentation materials with hands that had stopped shaking. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the whisper of paper against paper as I slid my documents back into their folder. "I see," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Thank you for making your position crystal clear, Richard." I walked out of that conference room with my head held high, but the moment the elevator doors closed behind me, I collapsed against the wall. The tears came then, hot and bitter, streaming down my cheeks as the reality of what had just happened crashed over me like a tidal wave. I was 29 years old. I had a master's degree from Northwestern University. I had generated over $50 million in revenue for Blackwood and Associates over the past 7 years. I had a spotless professional record, glowing client testimonials, and a reputation in the industry that most people twice my age would envy. And none of it mattered because I was a mother. That night, after I had fed my daughter Sophia her evening bottle and rocked her to sleep in the nursery I had painted soft yellow during my maternity leave, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop glowing in the darkness. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the baby monitor and the occasional creak of settling wood. I opened a new document and began to type. "Dear Richard," I wrote, then deleted it. "Too personal. To whom it may concern." I tried next, then deleted that too. "Too formal." Finally, I settled on something simple. "I hereby submit my resignation from Blackwood and Associates, effective immediately." But as I sat there in the blue glow of my screen, staring at those words that would officially end the career I had built so carefully, so deliberately, something else began to take shape in my mind. Not just a resignation letter, but a promise. A vow to myself and to my sleeping daughter. I would never again have to ask permission to be both a mother and a professional. I would never again have to choose between the two most important parts of my identity. I would never again sit in a room full of people who saw my motherhood as a weakness instead of recognizing it for what it truly was. A superpower that had made me more efficient, more focused, more determined than I had ever been in my life. I sent the resignation letter at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March. And then I got to work. The months that followed were brutal in ways I had never imagined possible. I had saved enough money to cover about 3 months of expenses, which seemed reasonable when I was riding high on righteous indignation and burning bridges with my former employer. But 3 months stretched into 6, then 9, as I discovered just how challenging it was to build a consulting business from scratch while caring for an infant. I learned to work in 15-minute increments between feedings. I mastered the art of conducting conference calls while bouncing a fussy baby on my hip, my phone on mute whenever Sophia decided to exercise her impressive vocal range. I wrote proposals at 2 a.m., fueled by black coffee and pure determination, after spending the evening dealing with teething pain and sleep regressions. My office became wherever I could find Wi-Fi and a flat surface for my laptop. I took client calls from my car in grocery store parking lots, using my daughter's nap time as sacred, uninterrupted work time. I drafted contracts in pediatrician waiting rooms, proofread marketing materials while sitting on park benches watching Sophia sleep in her stroller. The rejections came in waves. Potential clients who seemed interested during initial conversations would suddenly become unavailable when they learned I was a new mother working from home. Others would ask pointed questions about my availability, my commitment, my ability to travel on short notice. The same questions that would never have been asked if I were a father running his own consulting firm. But every no made me sharper. Every rejection forced me to refine my pitch, to identify new markets, to develop innovative solutions that larger firms were too bureaucratic to implement. I learned to position my flexibility as an advantage rather than apologizing for it. I started targeting smaller companies that valued agility and personal attention over corporate prestige. Slowly, incrementally, the tide began to turn. My first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Helena Morrison, the CEO of Morrison Industries, the same company I had saved for Blackwood and Associates 3 years earlier. She had started her own firm after selling her previous business, and needed help developing a go-to-market strategy for a new product line. "I remember you," she said during our initial video call, Sophia gurgling happily in her bouncer just outside the camera frame. "You were the only person at Blackwood who actually listened to what we needed instead of trying to sell us what you had." That contract led to another, then another. Helena introduced me to her network of female executives and entrepreneurs, women who understood the challenges of balancing professional ambitions with family responsibilities. They became not just clients, but champions, referring me to their colleagues and singing my praises in industry circles. By the time Sophia turned 2, I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. I had built a client roster that any consulting firm would envy, with retention rates that made my former colleagues take notice. More importantly, I had proven to myself that being a mother had not made me less capable. It had made me infinitely more resourceful. I hired my first employee when Sophia turned 3, Dr. Amara Okafor, a brilliant strategist who had left the corporate world after her second child was born, and her company refused to accommodate her need for a flexible schedule. Together, we began taking on larger projects, more complex challenges, higher-profile clients. Within a year, our small consulting firm had grown to 8 employees, all of them women who had been underestimated, overlooked, or outright dismissed by traditional corporate structures. We worked from a shared office space in the Arts District, with a small play area in the corner, where children could color or nap while their mothers changed the business world one innovative solution at a time. We called ourselves Phoenix Consulting, because we had all risen from the ashes of careers that others had declared dead. I should have been satisfied. I had built something meaningful from nothing, created opportunities for other women who had been written off by short-sighted employers, established a reputation as one of the most innovative consulting firms in the region. Sophia was happy, healthy, and thriving in an environment where she could see her mother pursuing her dreams without apology. But late at night, when the rest of the world was asleep and I was reviewing quarterly reports or preparing for board presentations, I would sometimes find myself thinking about Richard Blackwood, and that conference room where he had tried to end my career with 8 dismissive words. The anger had not faded. If anything, it had crystallized into something harder, more focused. Not just anger at Richard, but at a system that forced talented women to choose between motherhood and professional success. At a culture that saw pregnancy as a liability rather than recognizing the incredible skills that mothers develop. Multitasking, prioritization, efficiency, patience, problem-solving under pressure, and the ability to function on minimal sleep while maintaining peak performance. I had proven that mothers were not distractions. We were secret weapons. And then, on a Wednesday morning in October, when Sophia was 5 years old and had started kindergarten, my assistant Victoria handed me a newspaper clipping that would change everything. The headline read, "Blackwood and Associates faces financial crisis, seeks buyer." I read the article 3 times, my hands trembling slightly as the implications began to sink in. Richard's company, the firm that had once seemed unshakable, was drowning in debt. A series of poor investments, lost clients, and expensive legal settlements had pushed them to the brink of bankruptcy. They were actively seeking a buyer to acquire their assets and assume their contracts. The irony was not lost on me. While I had been building Phoenix Consulting from the ground up, proving that mothers could be just as successful as their childless counterparts, Richard had been running his company into the ground. I spent the next 2 weeks conducting the most thorough due diligence of my career. I analyzed their financial statements, reviewed their client contracts, assessed their real estate holdings, and evaluated their intellectual property. What I discovered was both shocking and oddly satisfying. Blackwood and Associates was hemorrhaging money, but their problems were largely operational, not structural. They had excellent office space in the financial district, valuable long-term contracts with major corporations, and a solid reputation that had been tarnished but not destroyed. With the right leadership and some strategic restructuring, the company could be turned around within 18 months. More importantly, the asking price was within my reach. Phoenix Consulting had grown exponentially over the past 3 years. We had secured several high-value, multi-year contracts that provided steady revenue streams. I had been conservative with expenses and aggressive about reinvesting profits back into the business. My personal credit was excellent, and I had relationships with several banks that were eager to finance acquisition loans for successful female entrepreneurs. I could buy Blackwood and Associates outright. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning as I sat in my office, surrounded by financial projections and acquisition proposals. I could purchase the company that had once rejected me. I could walk back into that conference room, not as an employee begging for respect, but as the owner, the boss, the person with ultimate authority over every decision. But as satisfying as that revenge fantasy was, something deeper was driving me. This was not just about proving Richard wrong or settling old scores. This was about creating the kind of workplace that I had dreamed about during those long nights of feeding and rocking a fussy baby while worried about paying the mortgage. This was about building something revolutionary. I made the offer on a Friday afternoon in November. By Monday morning, I was the new owner of Blackwood and Associates. The purchase price was $2.3 million, financed through a combination of Phoenix Consulting assets, bank loans, and investor capital. It was the largest financial risk I had ever taken, but it felt like the most natural decision in the world. The first person I called after signing the paperwork was my daughter's babysitter, to let her know I would be late picking up Sophia because I had just bought a company. The second person I called was Richard Blackwood himself. "Hello, Richard," I said when he answered his phone, my voice calm and professional despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "This is Juliette Marlowe. I wanted to personally inform you that I am now the owner of Blackwood and Associates. Your final paycheck and severance package will be ready for pickup on Monday morning." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that I thought he might have hung up. "Juliette?" he finally said, his voice small and confused. "I do not understand." "I bought the company, Richard. Phoenix Consulting acquired all assets, contracts, and liabilities of Blackwood and Associates as of this afternoon. Your employment is terminated immediately." Another long pause. "But how is that possible?" "Turns out this job is for moms after all," I replied and hung up the phone. Walking back into that office building for the first time in over 5 years was surreal. The marble lobby looked exactly the same, with its expensive artwork and fresh flower arrangements that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. The elevator still played the same classical music. Even the smell was identical: leather, coffee, and the faint trace of expensive cleaning products. But everything had changed. Because this time, I was not arriving as an employee hoping to prove my worth. I was arriving as the owner, carrying with me the authority to reshape this entire organization according to my vision. The staff meeting I called for Monday morning was tense and awkward. Most of the employees I had worked with years earlier were still there, looking nervous and uncertain as they filed into the same conference room where Richard had once tried to end my career. Some of them avoided eye contact, clearly remembering how they had sat in silence while I was being humiliated. Others seemed genuinely pleased to see me, though confused about the circumstances of my return. I stood at the head of the table, in the exact spot where Richard used to hold court, and looked around at faces that were both familiar and strange. These people had witnessed one of the most devastating moments of my professional life. Now they were about to witness my greatest triumph. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and confident. "For those who do not remember me, my name is Juliette Marlowe, and I am your new owner and CEO. As of Friday afternoon, Phoenix Consulting acquired all assets of Blackwood and Associates. We will be operating under a new company name, Phoenix Corporate Solutions." The room was dead silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming, papers rustling, someone shifting in their chair. "I want to address the obvious question that many of you are probably wondering about," I continued. "Yes, I am the same Juliette Marlowe who worked here several years ago. Yes, I am the same woman who was told by Richard Blackwood that this job was not for moms. And yes, I have just purchased this entire company." A few people exchanged glances. Marcus Rodriguez, whom I had trained during his first year, was staring at me with undisguised admiration. Isabella Chun had tears in her eyes. "But I did not buy this company for revenge," I said, though the satisfaction I felt was undeniable. "I bought it because I believe we can build something better here. Something revolutionary. Something that recognizes the incredible value that working parents bring to the business world." I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. Effective immediately, Phoenix Corporate Solutions will become the first major consulting firm in this region to offer comprehensive family support services for all employees. We will provide flexible scheduling, remote work options, and most importantly, we will be constructing a state-of-the-art childcare center right here in this office. The gasps were audible now. People were sitting up straighter, leaning forward, suddenly very interested in what I had to say. "The daycare center will occupy the entire 4th floor," I continued, clicking to architectural plans that I had been secretly developing for months. "It will be staffed by certified early childhood educators, and will be available to all employees at no cost. Because contrary to what some people believe, having children does not make you less valuable as a professional. It makes you more valuable." The presentation continued for another 30 minutes as I outlined my vision for Phoenix Corporate Solutions. Extended parental leave policies, lactation rooms on every floor, flexible scheduling that recognized that school pickup times were not negotiable, remote work options that allowed employees to be present for sick days and snow days without sacrificing productivity. But the centerpiece, the crown jewel of my plan, was the daycare center. Construction began the following month. I hired the best architects, the most experienced contractors, and the most innovative designers to create a space that would make traditional corporate childcare look like an afterthought. The fourth floor was gutted and rebuilt from scratch, transformed into a bright, airy, joyful environment that looked more like a high-end preschool than a corporate amenity. The walls were painted in soft, calming colors: sage green, warm cream, gentle lavender. Natural light poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows that had been specially treated to filter out harmful UV rays, while maintaining the benefits of sunshine. The floors were cork, sustainable and safe for crawling babies and running toddlers alike. There were separate areas for different age groups. A quiet nursery with rocking chairs and soft lighting for infants, a toddler zone with age-appropriate toys and climbing structures, and a preschool section with art supplies, books, and educational games. The outdoor terrace was converted into a rooftop playground with artificial turf, sandbox areas, and even a small vegetable garden where children could learn about growing their own food. But what made this daycare truly special was not just the physical space. It was the philosophy behind it. I hired educators who understood that these children were not just being babysat while their parents worked. They were being nurtured, challenged, and prepared for their own futures. The curriculum included not just traditional preschool activities, but also exposure to different languages, basic computer skills, creative problem-solving, and social-emotional learning. More importantly, the daycare was designed to be integrated with the office environment, not separated from it. Glass walls allowed parents to wave to their children during the day. Children could visit their parents' offices for lunch or story time. The message was clear: your whole self is welcome here, including the part of you that is a parent. The construction took 6 months. During that time, I was working 18-hour days again, but this time it felt different. Instead of desperation driving me, it was hope. Instead of proving that I could survive despite being a mother, I was proving that being a mother had made me a better leader, a more innovative thinker, a more compassionate manager. Phoenix Corporate Solutions was thriving under my leadership. We had retained most of Blackwood's major clients, and several new ones had signed contracts specifically because of our family-friendly policies. Our employee satisfaction scores were the highest in the industry. Productivity was up 23% compared to the previous year under Richard's management. But none of that compared to the feeling I experienced on opening day of the Phoenix Family Center. It was a Tuesday morning in September, almost exactly 6 years after Richard Blackwood had told me that this job was not for moms. I arrived at the office early, as I always did, but this time I was not alone. Sophia, now 6 years old and starting first grade, was with me for a special tour before the official opening. She had been to the office many times during construction, wearing a tiny hard hat and asking endless questions about why we were building a playground inside a grown-up building. But this was the first time she would see it complete, fully furnished, ready to welcome its first families. The elevator doors opened onto the 4th floor, and Sophia gasped. The morning sunlight was streaming through the windows, casting rainbow patterns on the walls through the prismatic decorations we had hung near the ceiling. The reading corner was cozy and inviting, with plush cushions and shelves full of books. The art station was stocked with every creative supply a child could want. The dramatic play area looked like a miniature version of the real world, with a play kitchen, dress-up clothes, and puppets waiting for stories to be told. But what caught Sophia's attention immediately were the murals. I had commissioned a local artist to paint the walls with scenes of animals in their natural habitats. Elephants walking across African savannas, dolphins jumping through ocean waves, pandas climbing bamboo forests, and Arctic foxes playing in the snow. The artwork was beautiful and educational, but it was also symbolic. These animals were thriving in environments that supported them, just like the children who would play beneath these painted scenes. "Mama," Sophia whispered, reaching up to take my hand. "It looks like a magical place." "That is exactly what I was hoping for," I replied, squeezing her small fingers in mine. We walked through the different areas together, Sophia pointing out her favorite parts. The cozy reading nook that looked like a treehouse, the sensory play table filled with kinetic sand, the music corner with child-sized instruments. When we reached the large bulletin board where I planned to post photos and artwork created by the daycare children, she stopped and looked up at me with the serious expression she wore when she was thinking deeply about something important. "Will other kids' mommies be able to work here too?" she asked. "Yes, baby. That is the whole point. Mommies and daddies should not have to choose between taking care of their children and doing important work. They should be able to do both. Like you do. Like I do." She nodded solemnly, as if she understood the weight of what we had built here. In some ways, I think she did. She had grown up watching me fight for the right to be both a mother and a professional. She had seen me turn rejection into determination, obstacles into opportunities. She had learned, through my example, that being told you cannot do something is not the same as actually being unable to do it. The first families began arriving at 7:30 a.m. I watched from the glass-walled conference room as parents walked through the daycare with their children, their faces lighting up with relief and gratitude as they realized what this meant for their daily lives. No more frantic morning rushes to drop kids off across town before racing to the office. No more anxiety about sick babysitters or snow day closures. No more guilt about missing school performances or parent conferences because they could not get time off work. Dr. Amara Okafor was one of the first to arrive, carrying her 3-year-old son Kofi in her arms while her 5-year-old daughter Amma ran ahead to explore the art station. Amara had been with Phoenix Consulting since the early days, and watching her settle her children into this beautiful space felt like completing a circle that had started in that shared office space in the Arts District. "I still cannot believe this is real," she said to me as we stood together watching Kofi discover the block building area. "When you first told me about this plan, I thought you were crazy. But this is going to change everything for working parents in this city." "That is the idea," I replied. More families continued to arrive throughout the morning. Marcus Rodriguez dropped off his twin daughters, chattering excitedly about the books they had seen in the reading corner. Isabella Chun brought her 4-year-old son, who immediately gravitated toward the science exploration table, with its magnifying glasses and natural specimens. New employees I had hired specifically, because they were talented professionals who had been sidelined by family responsibilities, came in looking dazed and grateful. But the moment that will stay with me forever happened around 10 a.m., when I was standing near the large windows that overlooked the city, watching children play and laugh in a space that had been built specifically for them. A soft voice behind me said, "Excuse me, are you Ms. Marlowe?" I turned to see a young woman, probably in her late 20s, holding a baby who could not have been more than 4 months old. Her eyes were red-rimmed and tired, and she was dressed in what was clearly her best professional outfit, though it was wrinkled and had what looked like spit up on the shoulder. "Yes, I am," I replied. "You must be Carmen Santos, our new junior consultant." "I am," she said, shifting the baby to her other arm. "I just wanted to thank you. I mean, really thank you. I was about to give up on my career entirely. My previous employer told me that bringing a baby to client meetings was unprofessional, and I could not afford quality childcare on an entry-level salary. I thought I was going to have to wait until she started school before I could work again." She looked around the daycare, taking in the bright colors, the engaged children, the caring staff members who were already learning names and preferences. "This changes everything," she whispered, and I heard my own voice from 6 years earlier, making promises to myself in the darkness of my kitchen. "I know," I said softly. "That is exactly why we built it." As the months passed, the Phoenix Family Center became more than just a daycare. It became a symbol. Other companies began reaching out, asking for consultations on how to implement similar programs. Working parents from other firms started applying for positions at Phoenix Corporate Solutions specifically because of our family support services. Industry publications wrote articles about our innovative approach to work-life integration, but the real measure of our success was not in the press coverage or the consulting requests. It was in the small, daily moments that had become possible because we had dared to imagine a different way of doing business. It was in the sight of a father ducking out of a board meeting to read a bedtime story to his daughter over video call. It was in the sound of children's laughter filtering into conference rooms during afternoon playtime. It was in the confidence of employees who no longer had to apologize for leaving early to attend school concerts or staying home with sick kids. It was in the knowledge that being a parent had not made any of us less valuable as professionals. It had made us more creative, more efficient, more determined to build something better for the next generation. 6 months after the daycare opened, I had the brass plaque installed outside the entrance. It was simple, elegant, and carried a message that I hoped would inspire every parent who read it. For every mother who was told she could not. Every morning when I arrive at the office, I pause to read those words. Not because I need reminding of how far we have come, but because they represent a promise that I intend to keep expanding. This is not just about proving that mothers can be successful professionals. This is about creating a world where no parent ever again has to choose between loving their children and pursuing their dreams. Last week, I received a call from Richard Blackwood. He had heard about the success of Phoenix Corporate Solutions, about the innovative programs we had implemented, about the industry recognition we had received. He wanted to know if there might be any consulting opportunities available, if perhaps I might consider bringing him back in some capacity. I listened politely to his pitch, his explanations about how much he had learned, how much he regretted his past attitudes, how valuable his experience could be to our growing company. When he finished speaking, I said, "Richard, I appreciate you reaching out. But this job is for people who understand that being a parent makes you stronger, not weaker. I do not think you are quite ready for that level of responsibility." And then I hung up the phone. That evening, I picked up Sophia from the Phoenix Family Center, where she had been participating in the after-school program while I finished up a client presentation. She was covered in paint from an art project and bubbling with excitement about a story she had written about a princess who saved her kingdom by building bridges instead of walls. As we walked through the office together, past the conference room where Richard had once tried to end my career, past the offices where parents were wrapping up their workdays knowing their children were safe and happy just floors away, past the bulletin board covered with drawings and thank you notes from families whose lives had been changed by what we had built here, I felt the same fierce pride that had sustained me through those darkest early days of starting over. I had kept my promise, not just to myself, but to every parent who had ever been told that loving their children meant sacrificing their professional ambitions. I had proven that those were not mutually exclusive choices. I was both a mother and a successful business owner. And in creating space for that duality, I had created space for countless others to be both as well. The elevator doors opened, and Sophia and I stepped out into the lobby together, her small hand in mine, our reflections visible in the polished marble floor. We were walking toward our car, toward home, toward another evening of homework and bedtime stories, and all the beautiful ordinariness of family life. But we were also walking toward tomorrow, toward another day of building something revolutionary, toward a future where no parent would ever again have to apologize for being exactly who they are. As we pushed through the glass doors and stepped out into the evening air, Sophia looked up at me with the same serious expression she had worn on the day the daycare opened. "Mama," she said, "when I grow up and have babies, will I be able to work and be a mommy at the same time?" "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, my heart full of certainty and hope and the unshakable conviction that comes from turning your greatest challenge into your greatest strength. "You will be able to be anything you want to be. That is a promise. And it is a promise I intend to keep, not just for my daughter, but for every child who will grow up in a world where being a parent is recognized as the ultimate qualification for changing everything." If this story inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of determination, courage, and triumph over adversity. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Your support helps us share these powerful messages of hope and resilience with people who need to hear them most. Together, we can continue to challenge the status quo and prove that with enough determination, any dream is possible.